I am in the Netherlands right now. There are two cats in the room with me, and there is a British mother screaming at her toddlers next door. It's an interesting holiday. What month is it? What day is it? July. Is it July? Let's say it's July. This is what I read in July. What did I read in July? I don't have any of my books with me. Oh, okay. Life Ceremony. I read Life Ceremony by Sayaka Murata, one of my favourite books of the year so far. No surprise, Sayaka Murata is one of my favourite authors. This book, along with all of her other stuff, was translated by Jini Takimori. It is a short story collection by the best author coming out of Japan right now, in my opinion. Sayaka Murata frightens and shocks. She is punk. She speaks specifically to queer and neurodiverse people in my experience and the experience of a lot of people I've talked to. I did a video recently on the genius of Sayaka Murata that you can go watch. She's an incredible writer. And if you enjoyed Earthlings, Life Ceremony is just going to give you more of that. It's going to give you more stories that explore the concept of living outside of ordinary society, living on the fringes of what is customary, of what is expected, what is acceptable. It plays around with taboo, things that a lot of people don't appreciate and, quite rightly, would never allow. It's a method of her filtering life through a particular lens. These stories are frightening. And as I said in my review, they mostly come down to two different types. You've got stories where the world is a really weird place, where there is some tradition or aspect of society that we would find terrifying, absurd, frightening, unacceptable, but has become normalized. And you will have one or two characters within that story who, like us, find it frightening and gross and refuse to partake in it. Or you've got an ordinary world, our ordinary world, and people within that world who are behaving in frightening and scary ways, committing taboos and doing things that are unacceptable. That's pretty much everything that you find in Life Ceremony. It's an amazing collection of stories that showcases the power of imagination within the mind of Sayaka Murata. She is an author who is frightening us by just very viscerally and aggressively pointing out the pain that ordinary life causes so many of us. Next, I read my first ever Peruvian book, at least I think my first. This is Here Be Icebergs by Katja Adawi. This was translated from the Spanish by Rosalind Harvey, and it's a short story collection that deals with family in a lot of different ways. It looks at blood family as well as found family. It deals with the good and the bad, the trauma, and also the satisfaction that comes from a good family dynamic. It really looks at family from so many different angles and really considers what it is that family does to us and for us, and what our purpose is within a family dynamic. And again, not just your blood relations, but your found family, a group of friends, a family that you create for yourself or marry into. Every kind of family, or any time you might use the word family, comes up in this collection. And we look at these stories through a lens of almost voyeurism. We're looking into the lives of very ordinary people, and the stories are structured in such a way that a lot of things kind of happen in media res. You are just thrown into a life. You are given whatever information the characters and the writer deem to provide, and you go along with what happens. I found it really tantalizing and satisfying as someone who thinks a lot about the concept of family and reads a lot of stories and books about family. I found Here Be Icebergs to be incredibly satisfying. It gave me some new ideas and new angles to look at the concept of family through, while also reinforcing some of the things that I think of and some of the opinions that I have about family and family dynamics. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Please check out Here Be Icebergs if you haven't. It's a really worthwhile and very tiny little collection of short stories from Peru. Next, and this is another book that I reviewed, Gods of Want by K-Ming Chang. I loved Bestiary, which was K-Ming Chang's debut novel, and I loved Gods of Want even more. Partly because I love short story collections, but also because I feel that this was K-Ming Chang with her gloves off, which is a ridiculous thing to say because Bestiary also is not wearing gloves. Bestiary is a frightening and strange and surreal, folkloric, experimental, Dali-esque nightmare dreamscape of a novel. And Gods of Want is that, but more. Like, can you even imagine? If you've read Bestiary, Gods of Want is still going to surprise you in terms of the amount of sheer, surrealist, dreamlike imagination. Please watch my review, because in that I quote from the book a few times, and I try my best to express how it made me feel. There is so much surrealism and strangeness. This is just an exercise in hanging up your imagination and showing people what you're capable of, the things you've learned and seen in your life, and how your mind filters those things, how you see them, how K-Ming Chang sees the world, and she sees it in such a unique way. There is no writer in the world like her, I'm confident in saying that. She deals with migration because she and her family are from Taiwan and she lives in the US. She's exploring migration, maternity, matriarchy, everything to do with mothers and families and the women within families, and a lot of queerness as well. And all these things are wrapped up in migration. When you migrate, what does that mean for a family? How does that impact the matriarchy of a family? How does it impact your sense of self? And that, of course, is tied into her queerness and the queerness of her characters as well. And it's all folkloric and surreal and fairy tale-like. Impossible things happen every second in every story. I cannot sell Gods of Want enough. It's such a wonderful short story collection. Another book that has become a quick favourite of mine from this year is After Sappho by Selby Wynne Schwartz. After Sappho is incredible. A very, very special book. It's published in the UK by Gallibeggar Press, who are a wonderful indie publisher. It has just been longlisted for the Booker Prize, which is wonderful. I am thrilled. That list, by the way, looks really, really good, and there's a lot of stuff I hadn't even heard of on it, and I'm really excited to check some of those things out. After Sappho is a novel written as a series of vignettes and glimpses into the lives of real women from around the turn of the 20th century. These are women who were all impacted and influenced by the writings of Sappho. These are all women and queer people who paved the way in some way for each other and for the rest of us in terms of queer rights, queer narratives, feminism, women's rights, women's stories, etc., etc. It deals with a lot of people in a very short space of time, and it flits back and forth through time and through different narratives and perspectives. These women wind into each other and around each other, and it is a book that is full of hope and love and comfort for the women, for the queer people, for the feminists among us. It is beautiful, it is important, it is poetic and stunning and sensitive and kind and sweet and warming. I absolutely urge everyone to read After Sappho. I had a really good reading month this month. So many of these books. I have so many wonderful things to say. Life's Ceremony, Gods of Want, After Sappho. These are such wonderful books by incredible women. I'm thrilled by what I've read this month. Fucking cool. I also read my favourite non-fiction book of this year, which was Bad Gays by Hugh Lemmy and Ben Miller. These guys run a podcast together that's super famous, and when I talked about the book, a lot of people said, yeah, I love the podcast, you should listen to the podcast, and I will. The book is a collection of miniature biographies. Every chapter is the biography of a different gay man and one gay woman throughout history, and all these people are horrible. Tyrants, fascists, gangsters, monsters, abusers, really dreadful, terrifying people who are all queer. And it's a book that serves to remind us that positive narratives about wonderful queer people don't actually always do us as much good as we think, because it is us just trying to convince the rest of the world that queer people are amazing all of the time. And that's not true, is it? Because we're all human. And Bad Gays shows that we're at a point now where we can confidently talk about the really fun and satisfying lives of terrible gays throughout history. And Bad Gays really celebrates these people. Yukio Mishima, Ronnie Cray, Hadrian, Lawrence of Arabia. There are so many cool people in here. People I was familiar with, people I was already obsessed with, like Yukio Mishima, and people I knew nothing about. Really such a satisfying book. Full of just a little bit of sass and quirkiness and cheekiness as well, but wonderfully well researched, brilliantly expressed, a perfect non-fiction book, Wonderful collection of biographies. Really, really great. I also read quite a lot of manga, as I always do every month, and I literally can't remember. I can't remember what manga I read. I remember reading a bunch of chapters of Knights of Sidonia, and I'd like to do a video on that. I'd like to talk about Knights of Sidonia, but I feel like I need to read it again. I think I rushed through it. So we'll leave manga. Lapvona. I read Lapvona by Otessa Moshfegh. I had a lot of fun putting my video together because Lapvona is a book that pissed a lot of people off. It's full of abuse and gratuitous violence and shock value. In my video, which only just went up a few days ago, I argued that Lapvona is deeper than that. I argued that the shock value is fine. Sometimes it's fun. And I argued that it feels like you're watching a stage play. You feel detached from these characters and you're watching it just to feel shocked and frightened like you're watching a horror film. And that is very satisfying and gratuitous. But I also insisted that there are deep and dark and important themes being explored here. Themes about classism and the abuse of women and the abuse of the natural world. And yet I then read an article in Vulture that reviewed the book and also talked about some of Otessa Moshfegh's views and opinions and things she said, and she just seems like a childish prick. She genuinely seems like an internet troll who's just trying to wind everybody up and piss everyone off and do daring and cheeky and naughty things. She seems dreadfully childish. And so I feel like I was giving Lapvona way too much credit. I was reading into themes that she definitely didn't put in there. But I enjoyed it nonetheless. She seems like a bit of a twat. Fine. But I still really enjoyed Lapvona and I do want to read more of her work. I really think Lapvona is a wonderfully satisfying book. I think it's brilliantly written. I love the fact that it really feels like you're watching a play. And I enjoyed all the horror, all the creepy stuff. It's very imaginative and strange and wonderful. And I love horror. So great. I really still enjoyed Lapvona. I think it's wonderful. It's just a shame that she is getting celebrated by me as well, and I didn't realize what a child she is. Okay, finally, here are two books, both of these by trans authors. This one, by the time this video goes up, there will be a video about this. Yes, that's how time works. Manhunt was a lot of fun to read, but this is another author who can be a bit of a twat. Gretchen Felker Martin pisses a lot of people off, and it's all very childish and irritating. Just ignore that. Manhunt is a really, really clever, visceral, frightening, brutal, nasty piece of work. I would say perhaps the most aesthetically frightening and shocking novel I've ever read. Truly, some of the brutal blood and guts stuff that happens in here is spine-chilling. But I've read so much and seen so much that I do feel kind of desensitized, and not everyone is like that, so this can be almost too much to bear for some people, I'm sure. But it's about two trans women who live in a post-apocalyptic landscape, very Y the Last Man, very Cormac McCarthy's The Road. But in it, the disease that has ravaged the world affects testosterone. If you have high testosterone levels, as most cis men do, you're going to be turned into basically a zombie. And everyone else is safe, and that includes these two trans women who are trying to fight off this horde of horny, aggressive, scary zombie men, which of course are an angry analogy for what toxic masculinity is like in general. But they're also trying to fight off the TERFs that have formed a cult that are trying to murder them. And it really feels like this is the end game of TERFism, forming a cult that is literally just a lynch mob, capturing and murdering trans people. It's a visceral and horrible novel, and it rings way too true for so many of us in terms of what we think could happen and could be possible, and I firmly believe that. It's a book about primarily a group of trans people trying to survive in a landscape of toxic masculinity taken to its furthest possible allegorical point, and the same for TERFism. It's horrible. I loved it. Finally, I don't have a lot to say on this one yet because I'm only 100 pages in and it's 400 pages long. This is Summer Fun. I'm going to assume that the author's name is pronounced Jean. In French, I think that would be pronounced Jean Thornton. Again, she is a trans woman who has been writing this book for quite a number of years. Tori Peters had good things to say about it, and I love Tori Peters. Detransition Baby is one of my favourite novels. And this is a curious book about fandom and the effects that the things we are fans of have on us. It's written in an epistolary style. Every chapter is a letter from this trans woman writing in 2009 to the member of a band that she grew up on that meant a lot to her. This band member is just called B. You just get his name as B. And they're basically the Beach Boys. They were a band from the 60s and 70s that embodied Americana musically. So they're the Beach Boys. And she's been writing letters to this guy, talking about his life, kind of regaling his life back to him, as well as her own life and the things that she's gone through. And that's all I'll tell you. I'll do a full review of it very soon, probably in a few days' time, but I'm really, really enjoying this. I'm enjoying her narrative, his narrative. Everything in it is a blast. I don't know where it's going. I don't know thematically what it's going after, except the fact that for queer people, fandoms typically mean a lot to us, and the things that we are fans of really do shape us. I keep kind of projecting myself into this book and imagining writing letters to Gerard Way of My Chemical Romance. He was my idol, still is in a lot of ways. So in that sense, I get it. But I wonder if there's more going on that I'm looking forward to exploring and talking about in my review. But Summer Fun is fun. I think that's everything I read in July. I'm honestly not sure. I'm definitely missing out a lot of manga, like I said. Did I read any other non-fiction or comics or something? I don't know. That'll do. Happy reading. Happy August, if it is about to be August, which I think it is. Literally don't know anything anymore. Subscribe for books.